Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Sichos Haran shir. My name is Effie Sussman, and tonight we're going to be doing Sikha number 67. So tonight's shir, it's a very important lesson about following good advice, something that we could all use reminders of. I'm just going to pull up the shir screen and we'll dive right in. Okay. Here we go, 67. Ignoring the words of the wise can cause insanity. This insanity only comes about because one ignores the advice of the wise. If he would take rational advice, he would be normal. His mental state might indicate to him the need to do such things as tearing his clothes and rolling in the muck, but a wiser man than he tells him not to do these things. If he would only subjugate his will to the wise, insanity would disappear. Therefore, insanity only results from ignoring the wise. Understand this well. So Rabbi Nachman tells us that insane people are only insane because they ignore the advice of people smarter than them and wiser than them. If they would listen to these people, then they wouldn't do the actions they do. They would just be normal. I think we think about these things with our kids too, right? Like even silly things like going outside in the cold without a coat. And we tell them, you should listen to me. I'm older and wiser than you. I know what's better for you. But, just to bring it back to this piece, if we take it in the way that Rabbi Nachman is saying this, I love it because he just calls it out and he simplifies it. Take an example, just think of the latest scandal that you heard, so some people say, what's wrong with these people? All these people that are involved with the scandal, or other people are kinder and maybe say, people are complex. Who knows what the real story is? Who knows what they were thinking? Who knows what really happened? But Rabbi Nachman quickly and ever so simply enlightens us with this piece of information of just, they didn't listen to advice of people smarter and wiser than them. That's it. It's as simple as it comes. And it's the same thing when we think of insanity or craziness, or we think about all the complexities involved. But Rabbi Nachman's saying it's not that. It's just that they don't take good advice. If they would take good advice, they wouldn't be in these positions, these people. So I love the simplicity of this. So I just want to mention here another point, because Rabbi Nachman's talking about insanity here, and it reminded me of Torah Aleph and Likutei Moharan, where Rabbi Nachman tells us that all sins take place when a person is under, he calls it a ruach shtus, a spirit of foolishness. This ruach shtus comes and takes over, and then a person, God forbid, does an avera. He commits a sin. So when our sins pile up with this ruach shtus, we collect insanity. It piles up and piles up and piles up, and a person becomes insane. And Rabbi Nachman goes on to say that that's why people have quirks and idiosyncrasies. It's all from this craziness in their averos, from their averos. So later in that piece, Rabbi Nachman teaches us that the way to cure this insanity is through learning Torah. So it's just an interesting thing to know, because he talks about insanity here, about not listening to people who are wiser and smarter than us. And he's talking about insanity in this first piece in Likutei Moharan, where he says that it's a result of averos, and the way to cure it is through learning Torah. So I just wanted to bring that parallel. Okay. So I wanted to bring in another piece from a very special book. And the author is Rabbi Avraham Twerski, who passed away yesterday. So Rabbi Twerski was, a man who wrote 60 books. He was a rabbi. He was a psychologist. And as my husband put it so well, he really pioneered mental health in the Jewish community. He died when he was 90 years old. So you can imagine what stigmas he had bringing this type of awareness into the Jewish community. So a lot of his books had a really, really big impact on me. This one in specific, it's along the way. I've read it a bunch of times. It's a commentary on Sichos Haran. It's his commentary on Sichos Haran. And, Sichos Haran, it's it's a very intense and in-depth book. And Rabbi Twerski does such a beautiful job just laying it out and explaining it and bringing it to life. So I wanted, and it's funny because there's a piece in here that goes perfectly with this topic. So I wanted to bring it in. So I'm reading from Lights Along the Way again, page 85 to 87. And I'm going to pull up the share screen. But unfortunately, it did get a little bit cut off. So I'm going to just look in the safer as I read it. Okay, let me pull up the share screen. Okay, so we're reading from here. So the italics are actually from the Ramchal himself, and then after that is Rabbi Avraham Twerski's commentary. May his neshama have an aliyah. Okay. Living in this world may be compared to a maze, where there are numerous paths, many of which are confusing and interlacing, and all of which appear similar. The goal is to reach a portico in its midst. Some of the paths indeed lead to the goal, while others are deceptive and lead away from the goal. However, one cannot tell which is which unless one has successfully mastered the maze and reached the portico. Right? So the Ramchal is putting us in this situation where we're in this huge maze, or I don't know if anybody, I've done this with my kids. We went into a corn maze and we had to find our way out. So he's saying, so it's very confusing. You can't tell whether to go left, whether to go right. You don't know whether to go straight. You could end up walking around in circles the whole time. And if you have to go to the bathroom, it's not the best situation. But, so you can imagine this very confusing situation. However, one cannot tell which is which unless one has successfully mastered the maze and reached the portico. Someone standing on top of the portico has a view of all the paths. So, there's this high center area that's, higher than all the rest. And they have this bird's eye view of the maze, this person. Has a view of all the paths, which are true and which are deceptive, and he can call to those who enter the maze, follow this path or avoid that path. One who heeds this guide will soon arrive at the goal, while one who persists in pursuing his own intellect will blunder and may never arrive at the goal. So a person who enters the maze and listens to this man on top of the portico telling him, go left, go right, avoid this, go do this path, then they'll get to the center way quicker than the person who just wants to, who thinks that he knows best. So now we'll read Rabbi Twerski's commentary. Just going to rotate this. Okay. My work as a psychiatrist has enabled me to appreciate the accuracy of Ramchal's metaphor. The world is indeed very much like a maze, with more paths leading to dead ends or away from the goal than toward it. So I think that's just an interesting thing to know, that Rav Twerski says here, that there's actually more paths leading away from the goal than there are to leading to the goal. There's some people who, by virtue of their experience and knowledge, can point out which paths should be avoided and what kinds of behavior are self-defeating. So some people just know, right? A wise person will take advantage of this wisdom and experience and avoid at least some erroneous ways which are pointed out to him. Those who are intoxicated with their own intelligence and refuse guidance are likely to follow paths that lead nowhere. So a person who's smart will take advice and will learn which is the right way to go. But somebody who's, just conceited, basically, they want to follow where they think is the right way. And they a lot of times make many mistakes on the way. Of course, the validity of the metaphor is based on the premise that there is a goal to be reached, which Ramchal discussed in chapter 1. There are those who have never chosen a goal, and others who believe that there is no ultimate goal. The latter's only motivation may be to eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Ironically, even hedonism is deceptive because so many physical gratifications are but transitory pleasures whose consequences can be exceedingly painful for a long period of time. So Rav Avraham Twerski says that, like, so many times a person, there are those people who, like, all they want to do is just enjoy the pleasures of this world. But he's saying it's such a joke on those people because eventually all the consequences of these actions that they took are so painful and difficult that it's very hard to enjoy the pleasures of the world when you're suffering from these consequences. It is characteristic of the pleasure-driven person that he scorns wise direction. So this pleasure-driven person, he's not into listening to smarter people than him. Doing only that which he believes will give him immediate gratification. It is only when he begins to suffer the consequences of his behavior that he may seek guidance. So only when he sees the detriment that it's causing that he'll look for help. While it is never too late to correct one's errant ways, much of the harm that has been done to oneself and to others cannot be undone after one has awakened to the truth. A person who has wandered aimlessly through the maze and after being totally exhausted finally surrenders and heeds the instructions of the guide on the portico may ultimately arrive at the goal, but he may then be old and weary and may have lost many opportunities while engaged in futile efforts. So Avraham Twerski is saying, even though it's never too late to make the right choices and start listening to people who are smarter than you, there still might be a lot of missed opportunities from trying to figure things out your own way for so long. Okay. And then we're going to go to this part. What is the advice of the wise people give? What is the advice the wise people give? Come, let us make a careful accounting. They can do so because they have already tried and have found which is the only true path that can lead to the goal. Let us summarize. A person must constantly consider what is the correct path which Torah designates and whether his actions keep him on that path. This is what the prophet says. Let us seek our ways and examine them, and we will return to God. So the Ramchal is saying, what's the way to succeed? What's the advice that these wise people give? They say, let us make a careful accounting. Let us look carefully into our actions and like think which way is Torah way, which way is not a Torah way, and that will lead us on the right path. Okay, so Rabbi Avraham Twerski's commentary is right under it. In my rehabilitation center, we have a section for adults and one for adolescents. The people in the older group have gone through the myriad miseries of addiction, having themselves suffered greatly and inflicting suffering on others, particularly on those they loved most, right? So he has older people in his rehab and he has younger people. And the older people have seen the pains and the damage that their addictions have caused. The younger group have generally come to our attention as a result of their parents discovering they were using drugs or as a result of running afoul of the law. As a rule, they are too young to have experienced many of the painful consequences of the older group. So the younger group basically comes because they got caught. The older people often look at the younger ones and say, I wish someone would have intervened in my life when I was 16. I could have avoided 2 unsuccessful marriages, loss of numerous jobs, and much damage to my body. How lucky these young ones are. One might think that the younger ones would listen to these people who tell them, don't be foolish, don't do what I did, listen to your counselor. I wish I had been given the opportunity. But alas, youth is often impetuous, and instead of learning from the mistakes of others, they may say, it won't happen to me. In all walks of life, there are those who stand on the top of the portico and from their vantage point can point to the right path. Those who are wise will listen. So again, so he just ends it here that there's always these wiser people that are available to give this better advice. And it's up to us to really take in these people's advice, these wiser and smarter people's advice. So just thought Reb Twerski just like this fit in so perfectly. And he did such a beautiful job spelling this out about just listening to old, smarter and wiser people. Again, he was such a special man who made such a huge impact on many. He is Neshama Heaven Aliyah. So I wanted to bring in another piece from Sichos Haran. It's actually a very long piece, but we're just going to do the first few sections that talk about finding a tzaddik, finding a rav. Because again, it's like this idea of, we don't know everything, and we need to have so again, we don't know everything, and we need to find this. We need to have a person that shows us the right way to go. So I'm just going to pull up the share screen. Okay, so it's Sichos Haran, the first one, and we're going to be doing Torah 30. Okay, and we're going to start by 2. Okay, a person must seek out the greatest possible rav. So a person has to look and look for the greatest rav. Just going to rotate this, sorry. Okay, the reason for this is that a person needs a very great rav indeed, who can explain exalted concepts of godliness and who can illuminate and enlighten even him. The more lacking a person is, the more distant he is from God, the greater the rav he needs. We saw an example of this in Egypt, where the Jewish people were sunken in the 49 gates of impurity. They need an awesomely great rav, namely Moses, our teacher. For the sicker the patient, the greater the doctor he requires. So Rabbi Nachman gives these 2 great examples about how if the sicker, he gives this example about a doctor, just like the sicker the patient, the greatest doctor the patient needs. So too, like with us, like the lower spiritual level that we are on, the greater the rav, the greater the tzaddik we need to bring us out of it. And I mean, I think this is such a great insight about Rabbi Nachman mentions how Klal Yisrael was on, we were on the 49th gate of Tumah, of impurity in Mitzrayim. These are the Parshios now, right? And we needed this huge tzaddik, Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest Navi of all time, in order to pull us out from that, because like our souls were so sick that we needed the greatest doctor, the greatest tzaddik. We needed Moshe to pull us out. Therefore, do not make the mistake of saying, it is good enough for me to be a follower and student of a worthy, simple man who is accepted as God-fearing and respectable. Why should I aim so high and specifically seek out the great tzaddik? What would that I might first be like this simple, worthy man, as many people erroneously think, right? So a lot of people think, what do I need to find the greatest rav for? I just need a good guy. Like, I'm not so great. Let me first just be like this, yasher person. And then from there, I'll move on and I'll figure it out. But Rabbi Nachman saying it's not true. That's not the case. Do not make the mistake of saying this, to the contrary, to the degree that a person knows inside himself the extent of his unworthiness and his remoteness from God, so does he need to draw close to the true Rav, who is at the highest possible spiritual level. He needs the greatest spiritual healer, who is such a wondrous master of his craft that he's able to dress up such exalted insights as perception of godliness to present them to someone as lacking and distant as he. So again, Rabbi Nachman drawing at this point again that if somebody's on such a low level, they really need this huge, huge tzaddik to get them out of it and to really teach them these exalted levels of understanding Hashem. So it's just, again, like it's just a great piece to show like how important it is to find this Rav, the tzaddik that helps us on our way and that shows us the way and that gives us good advice. So I wanted to end with a final piece, actually a parable that Rabbi Nachman gave. It's called The Turkey Prince. And it's, we're going to see some insanity in it and we're going to see the tzaddik in it. And it really will bring the whole shir full circle. So Let me just pull up the share screen one more time and rotate one more time. Okay, here we go. Okay, the turkey prince. Once the king's son went mad. He thought he was a turkey. He felt compelled to sit under the table without any clothes on, pulling at bits of bread and bones like a turkey. None of the doctors could do anything to help him or cure him, and they gave him up in despair. The king was very sad. So, normally when it says the king's son, the king is Hashem, and the king's son, the prince, is Klal Yisrael, right? So this prince, he thought he was turkey, and he sat under the table naked, and he would just eat the crumbs from underneath the table. And the king was so depressed because no matter which doctor would come and see him and try to cure him, nobody was able to help him. Until a wise man came and said, I can cure him. What did the wise man do? He took off all his clothes and sat down naked under the table next to the king's son, and also pulled at crumbs and bones. The prince asked him, who are you, and what are you doing here? And what are you doing here, replied the wise man. I'm a turkey, said the prince. Well, I'm also a turkey, said the wise man. The two of them sat there together like this for some time, until they were used to one another. Then the wise man gave a sign, and they threw them shirts. The wise man turkey said to the king's son, do you think a turkey can't wear a shirt? You can wear a shirt and still be a turkey. The two of them put on shirts. After a while, he gave another sign, and they threw them some trousers. Again, the wise man said, do you think if you wear trousers, you can't be a turkey? They put on the trousers. One by one, they put on the rest of their clothes in the same way. Afterwards, the wise man gave a sign, and they put down human food from the table. The wise man said to the prince, do you think that if you eat good food, you can't be a turkey anymore? You can eat this food and still be a turkey. They ate. Then he said to him, do you think a turkey has to sit under the table? You can be a turkey and sit up at the table. This was how the wise man dealt with the prince, until in the end he cured him completely. So great parable. And but we see from here, first of all, we see that there was this turkey prince who literally, he was insane, and the tzaddik comes and he pulls him out of it slowly by slowly. I mean, there's a lot of different nice points to the story, like also the part where it says that the wise man sat with him for a while. He really, you see the empathy of the tzaddik, that he comes to him, he sits with him, he goes down to his level, and then slowly he brings him up, with love and patience and understanding. So it's an amazing thing. And, I give us all a bracha that we should find someone who will give us the correct advice, and that we should know when to ask for help and when to heed advice. So thank you everybody for listening, and have a wonderful night.